The day the human ambassador arrived, the galaxy expected diplomacy. What they received instead was uncertainty. I remember the moment clearly. The council chamber of the Galactic Concordium had never been silent for long. Hundreds of species filled its vast circular tiers, their voices usually blending into a constant ocean of murmurs, translated whispers, and mechanical interpretation tones. Yet that day the chamber felt unnaturally still, as if the entire station itself had paused to observe history. Humanity had finally answered the summons. For decades their species had existed on the far edge of charted space, an anomaly surrounded by conflicting reports. Traders described them as reckless. Explorers called them curious. Military observers warned they were unpredictable. Most troubling of all, humans had survived things that annihilated other civilizations. Their ships were primitive by Concordium standards, their technology uneven, and their territory small. Yet every fleet that had tried to intimidate them returned quieter. Sometimes not at all. The Council had decided the situation demanded contact. Not war. Not alliance. Observation. So the invitation was sent. And humanity responded with a single message. We will send an unarmed ambassador. That alone caused weeks of debate. Some species believed it was a sign of weakness. Others feared it was deception. The Ralthari Dominion insisted it must be a trap. No species with even basic survival instincts would enter the council chamber unarmed. But the human reply never changed. Unarmed. Now the chamber doors opened. The ambassador walked in alone. I leaned forward in my observation perch, adjusting the translation implants in my cranial ridge. As a historian of the Varen archive, I had witnessed thousands of diplomatic meetings. First contact rituals, surrender negotiations, trade alliances, declarations of extinction. None had ever felt like this. The human was smaller than I expected. Bipedal. Soft-skinned. Wrapped in dark formal clothing rather than armor. No visible weapons, no escort drones, no shield emitters. Just a single individual walking across a floor large enough to land a cruiser. Every sensor array in the chamber scanned them simultaneously. Nothing. No energy weapons. No hidden blades. No biological toxins. Unarmed. The whispering began immediately. That cannot be correct. Scan again. They must be concealed. But every scan confirmed the same impossible result. The human ambassador reached the center platform and stopped. For several seconds they simply looked around the chamber, calmly studying the hundreds of alien representatives surrounding them. Then they smiled. It was a small expression by human standards, yet it produced visible discomfort among several predator species. Human facial signals were notoriously difficult to interpret. Finally, the ambassador spoke. Their voice was calm, carried clearly through the chamber as translation systems activated. My name is Elias Ward. A simple introduction. But something about the tone held confidence that did not belong to an unarmed diplomat standing before the most powerful political body in the galaxy. The High Arbiter floated forward in the central gravity well, its translucent body shimmering with ceremonial light. You stand before the Galactic Concordium, the Arbiter announced. Your species has been observed for 73 cycles. Your arrival today marks the beginning of formal evaluation. Elias Ward nodded politely. We appreciate the invitation. Murmurs rippled across the chamber again. The Arbiter continued. Your message stated you would arrive without weapons. Our scans confirm this. Do you understand the risk you have taken entering this chamber unprotected? The human tilted their head slightly, as if considering the question. Yes, Ward replied. Then explain your reasoning. The chamber grew silent again. I felt my own sensory frills tighten with anticipation. Most new civilizations entered the Concordium with visible caution. Escorts. Defense systems. Diplomatic contingencies. This human had brought none. Ward clasped their hands behind their back. We came unarmed, they said slowly, because sending anything else would have been misleading. Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. The Arbiter's glow dimmed slightly. Misleading in what way? Ward's eyes moved across the gathered representatives, meeting the gaze of species that had ruled star systems for millennia. Then the human answered. Because if humanity arrived armed, the ambassador paused. For the first time since entering the chamber, their voice carried something deeper, something cold. You would interpret it as a threat. No one spoke. Ward continued. And that would create a misunderstanding. The arbiter's voice sharpened. A misunderstanding of what? The human ambassador smiled again. And suddenly I understood why every military report about humanity carried the same unsettling conclusion. They were not afraid of scale, Ward said quietly. Several representatives shifted uneasily. The arbiter's glow flickered. Clarify your meaning. Ward stepped forward exactly one pace. The chamber's gravity well hummed softly beneath their feet. If humanity truly intended to threaten the galaxy, the ambassador said, sending weapons would be unnecessary. The silence that followed felt heavier than gravity. Around me, the council sensor systems intensified their scans again. Still nothing. Still unarmed. Ward spread their hands slightly. We came unarmed, the human finished, so everyone here could understand something very important. The arbiter's voice lowered. And what is that? Ward's expression never changed. That this meeting, the ambassador said calmly, is humanity being polite. For several long seconds after the human finished speaking, no one in the chamber moved. The words hung in the air like a slow-spreading gravity well, pulling every mind toward the same unsettling question. What did that mean? From my elevated observation tier, I could see the representatives of 100 civilizations exchanging silent signals. Bioluminescent pulses, chemical whispers, encrypted transmissions flickering through personal comm units. Polite. The human had described their presence in the most powerful diplomatic chamber in the galaxy as polite. The High Arbiter drifted slightly lower in the gravity well, its luminous membrane tightening with what our translators interpreted as restrained concern. You imply, the Arbiter said slowly, that humanity possesses capabilities you have chosen not to demonstrate. Elias Ward nodded once. That's correct. The answer was immediate. Too immediate. A wave of scanning beams rippled across the ambassador again. Military-grade sensors activated from hidden recesses in the chamber architecture. Every spectral band from subatomic radiation to biological resonance. The results appeared on the Council's shared data feed. No weapons. No defensive systems. No energy signatures beyond the biological patterns expected of a human body. The Ralthari Dominion representative slammed one of its massive clawed limbs onto its platform. That is deception, the towering reptilian warlord hissed. Your species claims power while standing defenseless. You insult the Concordium. Ward turned to face the Ralthari. The human's posture remained relaxed, hands still loosely clasped behind their back. No, Ward replied calmly. I'm clarifying expectations. The Ralthari's slit-pupiled eyes narrowed. You claim your species could threaten this assembly without weapons. I didn't say threaten. Then what did you say? Ward paused. Misunderstanding, the human answered. That word moved through the chamber like a cold current. I felt my sensory frills tighten again. Humans had an unusual way of speaking, simple language wrapped around meanings that seemed larger. The Arbiter addressed the ambassador once more. If you are attempting to intimidate the Concordium, Ambassador Ward, I advise caution. Several fleets within this chamber have ended galactic empires. Ward nodded again, acknowledging the statement as if it were a routine fact. I know. That response triggered another ripple of whispers. The ambassador continued. We studied your histories before coming here. The Ralthari expansion wars. The Quen Dominion collapse. The extinction of the Haraxis swarm. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Ward's gaze moved slowly around the chamber. You've fought many wars, the human said. Some of them very impressive. The Ralthari bristled at the word impressive, but the ambassador raised one hand slightly before the warlord could interrupt. But humanity noticed something interesting about all of them. The Arbiter's glow pulsed faintly. And what observation is that? Ward's voice remained steady. They all follow the same assumption. I leaned forward unconsciously. The chamber felt different now. Not hostile exactly. More like the moment before a starship enters unstable gravity. Ward continued. You assume war begins when fleets move. The Arbiter tilted slightly. That is a reasonable definition. The humans shook their head. It's a late definition. A few council members murmured quietly. Ward stepped another pace forward, closer to the center of the gravity well. Humanity learned something early in our history, the ambassador said. Long before we reached space. The Ralthari's voice cut across the chamber. And what primitive lesson do you believe threatens the Concordium? Ward looked directly at the towering warlord. That war rarely starts with weapons. Silence again. Ward's voice softened, but the words somehow carried farther. It starts with misunderstanding. The Arbiter studied the human carefully. And you believe the Concordium misunderstands humanity? Yes. And your purpose here is to correct that? Ward hesitated. For the first time since entering the chamber, the ambassador seemed to consider their words more carefully. Partly. The Arbiter's glow dimmed further. What is the other purpose? Ward exhaled slowly. To prevent the kind of mistake that tends to happen when large political bodies meet new civilizations. The Ralthari laughed harshly. We evaluate potential threats. You preemptively eliminate them. Ward corrected gently. The laughter stopped. The chamber temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The Arbiter's voice became sharper. Are you suggesting the Concordium intends aggression against your species? Ward shook their head.
No.
Then why make such an accusation? Ward looked upward toward the higher tiers of representatives. I suddenly realized the humans' eyes had stopped moving randomly. They were observing us. Studying reactions. Measuring the room. The ambassador finally answered. Because humanity has seen what happens when civilizations meet something unfamiliar and assume control is possible. The Arbiter spoke again, slower this time. You still haven't explained why you came unarmed. Ward nodded slightly. That's true. The human folded their hands in front of them now. A strangely human gesture of patience. Let me ask the council a question instead. No one objected. Ward continued. If humanity had arrived with warships, defensive fields, and visible weapons, how would this meeting proceed? The Ralthari answered immediately. With caution. Exactly, Ward said. The human's gaze hardened slightly. But because we came unarmed, Ward gestured calmly to the massive chamber surrounding them. Many of you are already wondering how a species could walk into the center of galactic power without protection. No one denied it. Ward nodded once more. That question, the ambassador said quietly, is the reason I'm here. The Arbiter floated closer. And the answer? Ward's expression remained calm. The answer, the human said, is that humanity stopped defining weapons the same way the rest of you do. The chamber did not erupt into chaos. It should have. Any other species making such a declaration in the presence of the Concordium would have triggered immediate security protocols. Defense fields would have sealed the gravity well. Armed escorts would have surrounded the speaker. Interrogation drones would have descended from the ceiling like metallic predators. None of that happened. Instead, something far stranger took hold of the chamber. Curiosity. I could feel it spreading through the tiers of representatives, cutting through suspicion and pride alike. The human ambassador had said something simple, yet it struck at the foundation of how every major power in the galaxy understood conflict. Humanity no longer defined weapons the same way. The High Arbiter hovered silently for several moments before speaking again. Explain. Elias Ward did not answer immediately. The human seemed almost contemplative, studying the chamber as if weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, the ambassador spoke. Most civilizations approach technological development the same way, Ward said. You invent tools. Those tools become systems. Systems become infrastructure. And eventually, they become weapons. Several council members signaled agreement. This was a well-documented pattern of technological evolution. The ambassador continued. Humanity followed that path for a long time. The Ralthari representative crossed its armored arms. And then, Ward looked directly at the towering warlord. Then we nearly destroyed ourselves. The words landed heavily. Many species in the chamber had similar histories. Civilizations that reached the stars often carried scars from early periods of self-inflicted catastrophe. But Ward's tone suggested something different. Something worse. The Arbiter's voice softened slightly. Your records indicate several planetary wars prior to your expansion into space. Ward nodded. That's the polite summary. I noticed the human had begun pacing slowly along the central platform, hands clasped behind their back once more. Humanity spent centuries perfecting ways to kill each other, Ward said quietly. Faster weapons. Larger weapons. Smarter weapons. The ambassador stopped walking. But eventually we realized something. The Arbiter asked the obvious question. What realization? Ward looked up at the upper tiers again. That weapons aren't the dangerous part of war. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. The Raltheri scoffed loudly. Ridiculous. Weapons determine victory. Ward tilted their head slightly. That's what we believe too. The human turned slowly in place, making deliberate eye contact with multiple delegations. But every time we built a stronger weapon, Ward continued, someone eventually built a defense against it. A few council members nodded. Shield technologies, countermeasures, energy dispersion fields, this cycle was universal. Ward spread their hands slightly. And once defenses existed, the weapons stopped being decisive. The Arbiter's glow flickered thoughtfully. Your point. Ward's voice lowered. So, humanity started asking a different question. I felt an involuntary chill run through my sensory spines. The chamber had grown very quiet again. What question? The Arbiter asked. Ward's answer came slowly. What if the most powerful weapon isn't a weapon? Several representatives reacted with visible confusion. The Raltheri barked a harsh laugh. Philosophy does not win wars. Ward turned toward the warlord. No, the human said calmly. But understanding does. The laughter stopped. Ward continued speaking, their voice carrying clearly across the chamber. Humanity stopped focusing on building better weapons. Instead, we focused on understanding the systems that wars depend on. The Arbiter's glow dimmed. Systems? Everything, Ward replied. Economies. Communication networks. Supply chains. Political alliances. Cultural psychology. The ambassador gestured slowly around the chamber. Every civilization here relies on countless invisible structures just to function. Several council members exchanged uneasy signals. Ward's eyes sharpened slightly. Humanity spent centuries learning how fragile those structures really are. The Raltheri leaned forward aggressively. You threaten sabotage. Ward shook their head. No. Then what are you implying? The human paused again. When they spoke, their voice was softer than before. I'm explaining why we came unarmed. The Arbiter drifted closer. We are listening. Ward inhaled slowly. Because the most powerful tools humanity developed can't be carried into a room. A ripple of confusion moved through the chamber. Ward continued. They don't look like weapons. They don't register on scanners. And most civilizations don't recognize them until it's far too late. The Arbiter's voice grew colder. You are describing infiltration. Sometimes, Ward admitted. The chamber erupted into louder murmurs now. Security drones began quietly repositioning along the chamber walls. The Raltheri slammed its claws against the platform again. Enough riddles. State your capability clearly. Ward looked directly at the warlord. For the first time since entering the chamber, the human's expression hardened. You asked why humanity could enter this chamber unarmed. The ambassador pointed calmly toward the enormous viewing window that displayed the starfield outside the station. Because by the time weapons matter, the war is already over. A heavy silence followed. The Arbiter spoke slowly. You claim your species can defeat civilizations without fighting. Ward considered the phrasing. Then the human nodded. Yes. The Raltheri growled. Impossible. Ward's gaze moved across the chamber one last time. You think war begins when fleets arrive, the ambassador said quietly. Another pause. But humanity learned something very different. The Arbiter's glow flickered uneasily. And what is that? Ward's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That if you understand a civilization well enough. The human's eyes reflected the distant stars beyond the chamber window. You never have to fire a shot. The silence in the chamber became something physical. Not the quiet of peace. The quiet of calculation. Across the immense circular tiers, representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy stared at the lone human standing calmly within the gravity well. No weapons. No escorts. No visible defenses. And yet the tension in the room had shifted. Because for the first time since the meeting began, the Concordium was not evaluating humanity. Humanity was evaluating them. I could feel it in the subtle movements of the ambassador's eyes. Elias Ward was watching reactions with quiet precision, measuring fear,
pride,
anger, curiosity, collecting data. The High Arbiter floated slightly higher, its luminous membrane flickering as it processed the implications of what had been said. You describe a form of warfare that bypasses conventional conflict, the Arbiter said slowly. Ward nodded. That's one way to put it. The Raltheri warlord leaned forward, towering over its platform like a living fortress of scaled muscle and armored plates. You claim your species can dismantle civilizations without fleets or weapons, the warlord growled. If that were true, the galaxy would already belong to humanity. Ward did not react to the aggression. Instead, the ambassador spoke with quiet patience. Only if conquest was our goal. A wave of whispers rolled through the chamber. The Raltheri slammed its claws down again. Power without conquest is meaningless. Ward tilted their head slightly. That depends on what you consider power. The Arbiter intervened before the warlord could respond. Ambassador Ward, the Arbiter said, you have implied capabilities that challenge the fundamental balance of this galaxy. If such abilities exist, the Concordium must understand them. Ward folded their hands again. I expected that. The Arbiter's glow dimmed. Then explain them. For a moment the humans simply stood there, as though remembering something distant. Then Ward spoke again. Humanity discovered something unusual about intelligent civilizations. I leaned closer without realizing it. The ambassador continued. No matter how different we appear biologically, culturally, or technologically, advanced societies all evolve the same vulnerabilities. Several representatives stiffened. Ward gestured gently toward the surrounding tiers. Every civilization builds networks of trust. Governments depend on stability. Economies depend on confidence. Populations depend on belief. The Arbiter's voice sharpened slightly. These are foundations of order. Ward nodded. They are also pressure points. The chamber stirred uneasily. The Raltheri hissed in irritation. You speak like a parasite species. Ward met the warlord's gaze calmly. No, the human replied. We speak like survivors. That word seemed to carry unexpected weight. Ward began walking slowly across the platform again. Humanity nearly collapsed several times before reaching the stars, the ambassador said. Not because of enemies with stronger weapons, but because of internal fractures. The Arbiter asked quietly. You learned to prevent them. Ward's expression darkened slightly. No, the human said. We learned how they happen. Another ripple of murmurs. Ward continued. When you understand the stresses that break civilizations, you also understand how to apply them. The Raltheri's eyes widened with sudden realization. You destabilize governments. Sometimes. You collapse economies. If necessary. You turn populations against themselves. Ward stopped walking. The ambassador looked directly at the warlord. Only if someone insists on war. The chamber went silent again. The Arbiter's glow dimmed to a faint pulse. You are describing strategic manipulation on a galactic scale. Ward did not deny it. Humanity prefers not to use those tools. Prefer, the Arbiter repeated. Yes. The Arbiter studied the human carefully. And yet you brought this knowledge to the Concordium today. Ward nodded. I did. The arbiter drifted slightly lower. Why? For the first time, the ambassador's voice carried something heavier than calm confidence. Regret. Because humanity has seen this situation before. The arbiter hesitated. Clarify. Ward looked toward the massive observation window again. Stars drifted slowly past the station as distant ships moved through the void. In our early history, the human said quietly, powerful nations often encountered smaller cultures. The Ralthari's voice rumbled, and conquered them. Ward did not argue. Usually, the ambassador turned back to the chamber. But sometimes those encounters began peacefully. The arbiter asked the obvious question. What changed? Ward's eyes hardened. Fear. The word echoed through the chamber. Ward continued. When powerful civilizations encounter something unfamiliar, they often try to control it before it becomes dangerous. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The arbiter's glow flickered. You believe the Concordium may attempt such control over humanity? Ward answered without hesitation. Yes. The Ralthari growled. And if we did? Ward's reply came quietly. Then humanity would defend itself. The warlord bared its teeth. With the invisible weapons you described. Ward nodded. Yes. The chamber felt colder. The arbiter asked one final question. If your species possesses such capabilities, why reveal them now? Ward stood perfectly still in the center of the gravity well. When the human answered, their voice carried a gravity that filled the entire chamber. Because once misunderstandings begin between civilizations, Ward paused. They are very difficult to stop. The arbiter watched the ambassador carefully. And you believe this meeting prevents that? Ward exhaled slowly. I hope so. Another long silence followed. Then the arbiter asked the question that every mind in the chamber had begun to form. If humanity did choose war. Its voice lowered. How long would the Concordium last? Ward did not answer immediately. The ambassador simply looked around the chamber one final time. Then the human spoke. And the number they gave made the entire council chamber feel suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. 17 days. The number fell into the chamber like a collapsing star. No one spoke. For a moment the translation systems hesitated, as if the machines themselves doubted what they had just processed. Then the meaning resolved across hundreds of linguistic channels simultaneously. 17 days. Not cycles. Not months. Days. The Ralthari warlord surged forward so violently that its platform's gravity stabilizers shrieked in protest. Lies. The roar echoed through the chamber like artillery fire. No civilization could destroy the Concordium in 17 days. Elias Ward didn't flinch. The humans simply watched the warlord with the same calm patience they had carried since the moment they walked through the doors. I didn't say destroy, Ward replied quietly. That word again. Not destroy. The Ralthari's claws dug into the metal surface beneath it. Then explain. Ward took a slow breath before speaking. On the first day, the ambassador said, humanity would not attack. The chamber remained silent, every species listening. Instead, Ward continued, we would release information. The arbiter's glow pulsed faintly. What kind of information? Ward looked directly at the arbiter. The kind every civilization tries to keep buried. A ripple of unease passed through the council tiers. Ward continued speaking, voice steady. Classified intelligence. Political corruption. Hidden atrocities. Secret military programs. Economic manipulations. The ambassador gestured toward the chamber. Humanity has spent decades studying your civilizations, observing your networks, listening to your communications. Several representatives stiffened. Ward's expression remained neutral. You call them state secrets. The human paused. We call them leverage. The Ralthari snarled. You claim espionage. Ward shrugged slightly. Observation. The arbiter's voice lowered. And you would simply release this information? Ward nodded. Yes. A long silence followed. Then the arbiter asked quietly, and the next 16 days? Ward answered without hesitation. Chaos. The words seemed to darken the chamber. Ward continued. Populations lose faith in their governments. Allies begin questioning each other's loyalty. Military leaders panic when classified operations become public knowledge. The ambassador's voice carried the calm tone of someone describing weather patterns. Markets collapse. Communications networks overload. Political factions begin fighting for control. The Ral theory hissed. Civil unrest. Ward nodded. Exactly. The Arbiter's glow flickered uneasily. You believe the Concordium is so fragile. Ward's reply came immediately. No. The human met the Arbiter's gaze. I believe every civilization is. Silence again. Ward continued speaking. By the 5th day, emergency powers would be declared across multiple systems. Fleets would mobilize, not against humanity, but against their own internal threats. Several council representatives shifted in visible discomfort. The ambassador kept going. By the 8th day, misinformation would spread faster than truth. Rumors of coups, assassinations, secret alliances. Ward's eyes drifted slowly across the chamber. By the 12th day, someone would fire the first shot. The Arbiter asked quietly, "At whom?" Ward's answer came like falling ice. "Each other." A shudder of realization moved through the assembly. Ward clasped their hands together again. Humanity would never need to deploy a fleet. The Ral theory slammed its platform again. We would unite against you. Ward turned toward the warlord. No, the human said calmly. You would try. The chamber felt colder with every word. Ward continued. On the 17th day, the Concordium would still exist. A brief pause. But it would no longer function. The Arbiter floated motionless in the gravity well. You claim humanity could fracture the entire galactic order without firing a single weapon. Ward nodded. Yes. The Arbiter studied the ambassador carefully. And yet you came here alone. Ward gave a small, tired smile. Yes. The Arbiter's voice softened slightly. Why? The human looked around the chamber one final time. Hundreds of species stared back. Powerful civilizations. Ancient empires. Military coalitions that had ruled the stars for thousands of cycles. Ward finally answered. Because humanity doesn't want that future. The Arbiter remained silent. Ward continued. We came unarmed to prove something important. The Ral theory growled. And what is that? Ward's voice carried a quiet finality. That power only matters if you choose how to use it. The chamber remained completely still. After a long moment, the Arbiter asked the final question. Then what does humanity want from the Concordium? Ward smiled faintly. Trust. Murmurs spread across the tiers again. The Arbiter's glow flickered. That is not easily given. Ward nodded. We know. The human turned slowly toward the chamber doors. But it's easier than rebuilding a galaxy after 17 days. Ward began walking toward the exit. No guard stopped them. No drones followed. Just one unarmed human leaving the most powerful political chamber in existence. As the doors opened, Ward paused briefly. Without turning around, the ambassador spoke one final sentence. And, for what it's worth, a small pause. Humanity only revealed the polite option today. Then the doors closed behind them. And for the first time in the history of the Concordium, every civilization in the galaxy began asking the same terrifying question. If that had been humanity being polite, what did they do when they weren't?